this district. The NIH corridor, the federal health system, it's headquartered right here. And what we need to do is ensure that we're leveraging that and building out private sector activity. This could be like Route 128 or Silicon Valley. And this is already the knowledge capital in the world for the health sector. So that needs to take place. And in terms of working with Republicans, I have to say, my wife is a Republican staffer in Congress, and I smile at it. And I've worked with Republicans for years. I worked as a career civil servant. I think many in this room have worked in both Democratic and Republican administrations. It can be done. It is actually an okay thing to do. One has to know when to pick fights, but also when to cooperate. And there are significant points of overlap, in particular when it comes to private sector economic development here in this district.
Thank you.
Well, I would link two things. A loan forgiveness program for our college grads who are the millennials who are finding the most difficulty getting jobs. So I would target it. It's two things. We need a stronger loan forgiveness program. We have one at the federal level now, but it's about 20% of what it needs to be. So we need to transform the loan forgiveness program, and then we do need a job stimulus program for millennials. This is one topic that's probably easier to work with Republicans than something like immigration, because jobs is something they talk about a lot also. So I think by talking about that segment rather than some vast concept about jobs, but talking about the young people who are our future and dealing with a lot of their uncertainty and their inability to feel real patriotism, we need a jobs program for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, a little while ago I told you about the Technology Development Corporation that's popping out 2,500 jobs a year at $70,000 each. But the biggest problem we have in America today, by some estimates, there are 4 million unfilled jobs in our country because there aren't enough Americans trained to do them. In Maryland, go ahead. Clap. In Maryland alone, according to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, there are 14,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs. This is a crime, people. We need to dedicate the money that we should not spend on an unnecessary war in the Middle East and use it instead for our middle class and job training. Think about this. Think about this. If we could fill just half of those 4 million jobs, it would be an immediate boost to the GDP. Those people would be able to support themselves. They'd spend money boosting the GDP even more in the United States. That is the biggest deficit we have, and we have to solve it with job training.
Thank you. You have to understand the enormous source of funding that the federal government is to the states. I've served on the Appropriations Committee now for 9 years, and we prepare the budget for Maryland. We prepare a balanced budget. We depend a huge amount on the federal funding that is coming to Maryland to provide health, transportation, all of those sectors that create jobs. So what would I do as a number one issue? I would ensure that federal funds are not being cut. We see this being the approach, as we heard earlier, of cutting back on government spending so that we can then prove that government doesn't work. I served in the Clinton administration. I forgot to also mention that as a qualifier. I was there at the Department of Transportation with the service of the enormous sources that our states have for transportation. We desperately need it here in Maryland, and especially in Montgomery County. So we must ensure that those funds are protected. Thank you.
Senator Ramsey.
The American infrastructure is eroding. The bridges are falling down. The roads are crumbling. The microphones don't work. And we've got climate change as a crisis that has arrived. My friends, I am calling for a Green Deal in America, a massive plan to invest in American infrastructure in an environmentally positive and sustainable way that gets the economy moving, that disengages from the carbon economy and invests in the renewable energy future we need. I'm the only candidate, I think, who has said that I will not accept any money from big oil, big gas, or big coal, because we need to get this done quickly. So, in Minneapolis, I introduced the first benefit corporation law in America, so that the progressive and enlightened green corporations can register to have a publicly beneficial purpose in addition to the money-making purpose. That legislation is spread around the country, and more than half the states now, or maybe nearly half the states, have a benefit corporation law, including Delaware. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you talk to people like Seth Goldman, who created Honest Tea here in Bethesda, he will tell you that the jobs of the future are going to be jobs created by entrepreneurs. So we have to really be able to let entrepreneurs grow and have free reign to be able to create the jobs of the future. These are the jobs that millennials are interested in having. So whether it's a green tea company like Honest Tea, or something that is dealing with 21st century cures, working with the research that we develop at NIH with government funding, but actually have the manufacturing and the testing here in this area. Those are going to be great new entrepreneurial jobs. We're going to have great new jobs because of this green economy. I was visiting Bethesda Green, which is incubating all kinds of interesting new jobs and entrepreneurs as a result of getting that incubation money, that seed money. But we also need government to be a partner in this process, because those green jobs, whether they are building our infrastructure once again, or coming up with new energy sources of the future, or 21st century cures, I think are where the jobs in Montgomery County are going to be in the future.
Wireless microphone technology.
Check with the Bethesda Chevy Chase rescue.
We need to get our rescue squad's wireless mics. I will agree with that. Okay, so rattle a few things off. First, we have to fix our tax code and make it more fair so we can afford all of these investments, and make sure that, and raise the caps so that millionaires are paying higher tax brackets, and we need to close the corporate loopholes. I'll start with that. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is we need to invest in small minority business. Small business makes up over 90% of Maryland businesses. And too many of those investments, those folks are finding it hard to get capital to start a business. We have to invest in that real way and let people be innovative. We need to invest in green jobs and innovation, which has been mentioned. Technical education. It's a disgrace that Montgomery County has one technical high school and it's not even a full week. There's jobs that aren't filled. That's exactly right. We need to make sure we invest in technical education and training, something we haven't talked about enough here. We also need a stimulus, like I talked about earlier, that includes high-speed rail. It's a disgrace that we can't get around as fast as our competitors in other countries. And we need to make sure we move to that, because that's going to help our economy. And the last thing is child care. Child care frees up people to go to work and have jobs and contribute to the economy. Thank you.
We'll start this next question with Mr. Anderson. This is our second audience question. If elected to Congress, you will be asked to address the issue of the long-term solvency of Medicare and Social Security. What would you propose or oppose to address this?
Well, on Social Security, as I mentioned before, I really have a two-part view, and it really helps to define me as a center-left progressive who wants to work with the Republicans to arrive at solutions. So I think, A, on the one hand, we do have to increase the payments for 36% of people who rely on Social Security for 90 to 100% of their income. There may not be that many people in Bethesda who are like that, but they're in Silver Spring, and they're in Frederick County, and they're in Carroll County, and they're in Iowa, and they're in Mississippi, because you got to get a law for the whole country. Now, I also think, and here's where I agree with certain Republicans, that due to the great science we have, and the fact that people are living longer, we just celebrated my dad's 89th birthday, my mom's 85, it is time again to push back the eligibility by about 2 years, over a 10-year time period. So early eligibility would be 64 rather than 62. My stepson is 24. If we tell him that, it's not going to move in this next 40 years.
Delegate Barr.
Au contraire, mon frère. I do not support changing the eligibility requirements. The reason I don't is because there are a lot of people who have physical jobs, and they just get broken. And they end up, some of them, in my wife's a workers' comp commissioner. She sees some of those workplace injuries at the end of life. Look, we have to raise or eliminate the tax cap on Medicare, Medicaid, so that all income is applied to it. And I think but let me mention one other thing. If you've read the book Nudge, here is an example of a place where government policy can be very, very useful. We ought to be a country where automatically you are signed up for a 401k and you have the option as an employee to opt not to do it. There are a lot of people who would start to save for the retirement without having to make an affirmative decision. This would stabilize incomes for tens of millions of people, and we need to implement that as a federal policy.
Thank you.
I would fight back on all the attempts that we see that would weaken, that would cut back on Social Security and Medicaid. On the contrary, absolutely we need to strengthen both of them. We need to make sure that they are going to be solvent for the long term. Millions of people depend on their well-being on Social Security, including myself. That is a program that was created with the kind of vision that we need to ensure is going to be continued as the national policy in this country. And Medicare, that is already the model for what I would push for a public, a universal health care system that would serve everybody the way that it is, I believe, is the way that we need to be defending these critical, crucial programs. I love Bernie. He is doing us the service to defend these programs and represent them as they really should be. Thank you.
There's $2.1 trillion in the Social Security Trust Fund, so don't fall for Republican propaganda. This is a great American success story. Social Security endows old age with dignity and security for, through our history, hundreds of millions of people. We do need to lift the cap on FICA taxes so people like Donald Trump are not paying what people making $80,000 or $110,000 a year are making. It's something so logical, even Donald Trump supports that. I heard him say one of the days. Medicare, and I'm with Anna. Look, the civilized countries like France have universal health care for everybody. That should be a right in the United States of America. But in order to get there, we have got to stop the special interest ripoffs, beginning with Medicare Part D, where they wrote into the law that the government cannot negotiate for lower drug prices. Despite the fact that we can do it for Medicaid, we can do it for VA, and the chairman of that committee, Billy Townsend, went off and became president of Big Pharma. That's politics for the 1%. We got to stop that and get to universal health care for everyone.
My good friend Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, who I've known for years, shared a really chilling fact with me. She said there are studies that show that people are more afraid of getting old than they are of dying. And a large part of that is because of the lack of retirement security in this country. Too many companies have gotten rid of their pension plans. Too many unions aren't able to negotiate good pension plans for their employees. And so too many people are left with just that one Social Security check, which if it's $1,300 on average, that doesn't go very far in Montgomery County. So number one, we have to protect retirement security going forward. I would not raise the retirement age. It's already slowly escalating up, and there are too many jobs. Firefighters, police, people who are laborers who cannot do those jobs past 66 years old. And this should be retirement security for everyone. It is the best poverty alleviation program this country has ever created. However, I do think in order to pay for it and make sure it's there for my children, my grandchildren, your grandchildren, We do have to look at raising the cap for the very wealthiest to be able to make it solvent going forward.
Thank you. Social Security, Medicare, these are promises that were made to people that have worked hard their whole life. My dad is one of them. He unfortunately lost his job when he came down with cancer several years ago because he didn't have paid sick leave, by the way, and was late too many times and lost his job. Had to move in with us. Luckily, we had Medicaid to sign him up. He's 64. I signed him up for Medicaid. We sat down at the kitchen table and did that. Thank God it's there for him. Next year when he turns 65, thank God Medicare will be there for him. We need to fix the donut hole in the prescription drug issue, but at least it's there. And it's a promise. We can't roll that back. As far as lowering the age, one thing that hasn't been mentioned, average age of an African American male in DC, fact check, Blue Pack, is 66 years. You work your whole life and then you can't collect on anything that you worked. You subsidize for people that live longer. That's not fair. No raising the age. We need to do means testing. I had a person that wanted to give back their money, but they're not allowed to because of federal law. Not all people need Social Security. We need to allow that.
As I mentioned before, my mother-in-law lives with us, and we see it every day. Retirement security matters. It matters to her. My grandmother still collects the Social Security checks that my grandfather passed on to her and that she earned as well. You know, there's something missing when we talk about entitlements. It's not an entitlement. It's earned. I saw this when I fought for military health care through the TRICARE program. There were attempts by Republicans to gut that program. We fought back. Why? Because it was a commitment. And we'll do the same on Medicare and Social Security.
Thank you to all the candidates, especially for putting up with me cutting you off. Let's pass that mic on down to the end. We will move on to closing statements. We will start with Kathleen and work our way back up to Mr. Blunden. You have 1 minute for these. 1 minute.
You are all very lucky to have some great choices. You're looking at your next member of Congress at this table here today, 6 months before you have a chance to go to the polls. And I think the question you have to ask yourself tonight, and as you listen to this campaign progress, is who is going to be the most effective voice for you? In the way that Chris Van Hollen has been a tremendously effective voice for Maryland's 8th Congressional District. Who's the person here tonight who knows this community the best? Montgomery County, Frederick County, Carroll County, from the DC border all the way to the Maryland border. Who has spent the most time going out and traveling the roads, into your churches, into your schools, into your homes, into your workplaces, getting to know you and understanding what you care about? You also have a historic opportunity, I think, this year. We are losing Senator Barbara Mikulski, the very first woman elected by Emily's List, which has endorsed me in this campaign, is going to be leaving and retiring. We're in the House, so we're losing in those two roles, the two only women in the Maryland delegation.
Thank you.
And you have a chance to elect the first Democratic woman to represent the 8th Congressional District.
The last time I was in this room, there were 350 people here creating Women for Jamie. Okay, that was a fun day. And I understand not everybody here tonight is necessarily for me, but it's a great honor to be with everybody. And I want to say it's a great honor to be with the Women's Democratic Club and all the clubs, because the Democratic Party culture in Montgomery County, Frederick, and Carroll is vibrant. It's strong. I started as a precinct vice chair and as a chair. I worked for decades to get Democrats elected and to build our strong, progressive Democratic Party that we've got today. And I have a record of effective legislative accomplishment, which I think stands up to everybody on this stage. After only 9 years in Annapolis, leading the fight on the important legislative breakthroughs of our time. But we need to go to Washington to do it now. Why? Because we can have the best gun safety law in America, which we do, but the guns are still flown in from Virginia and North Carolina. We have the best environmental laws in America, but 50 waterways flow into the Chesapeake Bay. I want to go to Washington to bring the Maryland way and the successes that we've had right here in this state.
Thank you. You all will really have a tough choice on April 26th. And I think that speaks wonders for Montgomery County and who lives here. I think, though, that you deserve to have a person that is experienced, that has a proven track record, that you can see from their past performance what their future performance is. That's what I am. I am an open book. You can go back, you can check everything that has been my previous experience, my previous work for Montgomery County in areas that affect all of us. From the education of our children, you're not going to find anybody that knows more about education policy, about education spending, about school construction on this panel than what I can bring to the table. You're not going to have anyone who has both state, local, and federal experience. Thank you, Marilyn. Oh, well, thank you. I hope you will consider our qualifications for the job. Thank you.
Friend Ginger, here we are.
Yes.
When my grandfather came to this country, nobody looked like him. My parents, when they got married, there were no Hindu priests in upstate New York. My grandfather had to perform the ceremony. When I went to Rosemary Hills Elementary School, nobody looked like me. When I was at Georgetown, very few Indian Americans. I was the first man to be on the board of the Maryland affiliate of the National Abortion Rights Action League. And when I lobbied for choice, nobody looked like me in the House of Delegates. That's why I ran. That's why I won. I will, if you make me so, I will be the first Asian American member of Congress from Maryland in our nation's history. I will be the first accountant who is also a liberal from Maryland in our history. And I will implement liberal progressive policies, whether they are in healthcare, the environment, tax reform, as I have in Maryland, using skills that are unique to me. And I thank you again for this wonderful opportunity to discuss this all.
So I'm the contrary one tonight. Sorry, but the two front runners in this race, Ms. Matthews and Senator Raskin, represent an establishment orthodoxy that we already have too much of in Congress. They reflect a narrowness of thinking.
Let him speak.
They reflect a narrowness of thinking that is neglecting half of the families in this district and around this country. On family policy, the most important domestic policy issue in the United States, they have blindly accepted an outdated, unfair, and unworkable establishment position that neglects the needs of half of families. Now, I am an independent voice, a center-left Democrat who is willing to work with the best of all ideas, regardless of which side of the aisle they come from. And that is why I'm asking for your vote.
This is a precious district. It's a unique district. And this is the kind of district that needs a fighter. It needs a fighter, not only someone who can win in Congress, but also someone who can help make change across the country. One thing we didn't mention tonight is the Affordable Care Act. About 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. took care of it, I'm fine. But when I woke up in the ICU, I said, thank God I have health insurance. Nobody should have to go through that insecurity. I'm a fighter. I have a track record of working with the House of Representatives. I have a track record working in advocacy, a track record working in the federal government. I expect that there will be a lot of good debates going forward, and I very much look forward to speaking with all of you in the days ahead. Thank you.
Joel was right. This is a special place. It's the place that brought my parents here for opportunity. It's the place I'm proud to raise my family. And it needs a special member of Congress. Someone that has all the tools, that brings everything to the table, that is reflective of the great diversity that we have here. It needs a communicator. It needs a fighter. It needs an organizer. When I was at Catholic University, I organized a chapter of the first NAACP chapter at Catholic University. The school protested it. 6 months later, the president of the university was giving me an award for starting the chapter. We need someone who's worked in Congress, who knows how to work with Democrats and Republicans. And we need someone, I think most importantly, who has lived experience. When I talk about the issues that are affecting working families, it's because I have 3 kids under 5 and we struggle every month to pay for childcare. It's because I've taken care of an aging parent, my father, who lost his job due to his cancer. It's because my wife and I, who are good public policy lawyers, have a ton of student loan debt, something you didn't talk about tonight. You need someone that understands those issues